may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fails.
Hallelujah, we worship you. am I that you are mindful of me? Oh, and you heard me when I call. Is it true that you are thinking of me? Oh, how you love me. It's amazing. Yes, I am a friend of God. I am a friend of God. I am a friend of God. He calls me friend. Who am I that you are mindful of me? Oh, when you heard me when I called. Is it true that you are thinking of me? Oh, how you love me. It's amazing. Everybody now. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. He calls me friend. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. He calls me friend. God Almighty, Lord of glory, you have called me friend. God Almighty, Lord of glory, you have called me friend. God Almighty, Lord of glory, you have called me friend. God Almighty, Lord of glory, you have called me friend. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. He calls me friend. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. He calls me friend. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. I'm a friend of God. He calls me friend.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing, but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. strain was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open. 'Cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day.
Hey, it's really good to be with you tonight. Even if it is only on a recording, we schedule these things a year in advance, at least Isaiah does. And we were planning on playing tonight. I was planning on speaking tonight. But we thought we'd be doing it in person. And because of COVID, we can't do that. So we apologize for not being with you in person. We wish we really could be. And we pray that we will be with you soon. Sometime early next year. Anyway, I like to speak at Christmas because it's a special holiday for me. It's always been my favorite holiday. And in that, I'm just like most people who celebrate it. It's always great to get gifts, especially when you're a kid. You'd always get off school for a week or so. And where I grew up, there was usually snow. Snow is great until you get old enough to drive around in it anyway. Building snow forts, throwing snowballs, sliding down the hills. There was a neighborhood nearby that had a great hill you could zoom down for a good 200 yards. And if you were bold enough to cross the barricades at the bottom and risk the occasional traffic, you could get another 100 yards out of it. And then there's the beautiful quiet of the snowfall, especially if you're lucky enough to live far enough from all the traffic. I just love snow. Living in California for almost 48 years, I kind of missed the snow. You'd have to drive 4 or 5 hours to the mountains to see it. And yeah, you could get there and you could be in the snow and ski. And I love skiing, although I can't do it anymore. It's something that I always loved doing. And sledding and stuff. But in California, it really never rains. Never snows in the area that we lived in, at least not very often. I do remember it snowing once when I was in college. And I remember it snowing one other time when I lived in Mountain View. We did get snow in the backyard in our house in Mountain View. It didn't stay on the ground or anything, but at least we got the flakes. And it wasn't, but where I grew up, you'd get a couple of feet of snow in the winters, and it'd be great to mess around and do all the stuff that you can do in the snow. And when you're a kid, that's great. I realize it's not that great as an adult. I've never really had to drive through snow as an adult, except going skiing. And I know it's kind of challenging because I'll never forget the time I was in my van. We were up at Tahoe, and we were coming down out of our apartment and sliding down the hill, trying to stop and worry that we weren't going to make it without banging into somebody. But we did okay that time. And we did get up here in Washington State, we did get one solid snow last year. And I'm hoping that we'll get some snow up here again. But like I say, that's one of the things that I grew up with, and I loved it so much. And with snow on the ground, walking around the neighborhood, seeing all the lights in all the houses and everything. It was just something that I just really loved. And one of my fondest memories was going to the Christmas tree lot with my dad. We used to pick out a tree. You know, my parents got divorced when I was in about fifth grade. So these are pretty early memories for me in grade school. But I loved it. There was something about, all those fresh trees in the lot, the way they smell, squeezing between them. When you're a kid, you can get away with that and getting the pine scent all over you. And then bringing the tree home, setting it up, putting up all the lights and the decorations and stuff. These days, it's a little bit more challenging. Trees are a lot more expensive, and you can get these artificial trees, but I just can't see getting an artificial tree. I mean, some people like it, and really, in some ways, it's great because you don't have to go buy a new one every year. But I just have to have a live tree with that pine scent and all that stuff. And on our tree, when I was a kid, we had a set of blinker lights. There was, unlike the kind of blinkers you get these days, these had each bulb blinked on its own. So you could put the lights on the tree, and you get different shadows on the ceiling depending on which lights were blinking at any given time. And I'd like to lay awake near the tree, watch those changing patterns on the ceiling. It was kind of psychedelic, long before I ever had my first hit of acid. So Christmas was a wonderful time for me as a kid. My parents got divorced when I was in about fourth grade, so I didn't really have a family that was really together for that much of my life. But to the extent that we were together, my parents loved me, and I didn't have the kind of relationships that some of you have had with your parents, where there are many more difficulties. And my dad was never a violent man, so I didn't have to deal with those kinds of issues. But even though my mother was a religious woman, and she was a choir director at our church, I spent my youth doing Sunday school and singing in the choir, but the real meaning of Christmas didn't really sink in. It was a fun holiday, time to sing Christmas carols and decorate trees, but the words of the carols were just that, words. I never really thought about them much. And when I was a kid, I played trombone and baritone horn, and I was really into the music stuff. I learned how to arrange stuff. So I wrote a bunch of Christmas carol arrangements that got a brass quartet of friends of mine to go around and play Christmas carols for people in the neighborhood. And in California, it's cold, but when there's snow on the ground, your lips freeze to the mouthpieces, and it's always cold. But the people were really nice. They would invite us into their house to get warm and give us cookies and everything. So it was definitely worth it. But even though I did love the carols and stuff, it wasn't until many years later that I really got what they were all about. Because Jesus stepped in my life, redeemed me, and took me back as one of his own, even though I never really acknowledged him or even understood what the big deal was. All it took was a willingness on my part to give him a chance. Jesus is the great Redeemer, the one who paid our debt to God through his sacrifice on the cross. And to understand the Old Testament concept of redemption, it helps to go back to a couple of stories from the Old Testament. Way back in the book of Joshua, Joshua is scouting out the territory and looking at to take down the city of Jericho. And he sent some spies into the city to figure out the lay of the land. And it turns out that there was this prostitute named Rahab who had seen what had happened with the Jews as they had moved through the wilderness and heard stories about them. And she believed in the Jewish God. She had no hope of her own life through the gods that I don't know which gods that they believed in Jericho at that time, but she had no hope for her future in there. And so she decided to help out the Jews and provide them information and hide the spies when they came into the city. And in return for that, she was saved when the city was taken over. All the residents of the city were doomed to be conquered, and many of them killed. But Rahab, because she had helped the Jews and believed in God, was redeemed, was saved from her life of sin and her experience in Jericho. That kind of reminds me a little bit of my background, because I've told this story before about me being into pornography and stuff, and God was able to redeem a prostitute who had sinned in that way, and God was able to redeem me, who sinned in many similar ways. Another story from the Old Testament is the book of Ruth, and this is where we learn about what redeeming really is in the Old Testament. We're told the story of Naomi, who with her husband and 2 sons left their home in Bethlehem, Judea, because of a great famine, and went to Moab. There the sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Moab was an old enemy of the Israelites in a pagan land that practiced human sacrifice and was evil in many ways. To leave Israel for Moab wasn't just looking for a better life, it was also forsaking God. Failing to trust him to help him through the terrible times in Israel, and to take wives on the Moabites was, at least to some extent, accepting the pagan beliefs and practices. But as always, God had a plan of redemption. When all 3 of the men died, Naomi and her daughters had nothing. Women in those days were usually dependent upon their husbands for their livelihood. Clearly, none of the Moabites were willing to step up and take them on. So Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem in the hope of finding a relative to help them out. Naomi suggested that Orpah and Ruth stay in Moab, where they could find help from their relatives, and Orpah chose to do so. But Ruth had become a believer in the Jewish faith of her mother and loved her mother so much that she would not abandon her. So the 2 women returned to Bethlehem, where Ruth attracted the notice of a wealthy farmer named Boaz. And this is where the concept of a redeemer comes in. In the Jewish culture of the day, a widow could be redeemed by being taken in by a close relative. This would give the widow and her family a home and secure the inheritance of the dead husband. Boaz happened to be such a relative and fell in love with Ruth and became his redeemer. But just as important as the fact that Naomi and Ruth became redeemed through Boaz is the fact that Ruth and Boaz became the great-grandparents of King David, and through him, the ancestors of Jesus himself, the great Redeemer, who, we remember, was born in Naomi's hometown of Bethlehem some 1,300 years later. If you've wandered off the track, made bad choices, ended up in your version of Moab, there is hope for you too. Just as Naomi returned to her people and was able to be redeemed, so you can return to God and he will redeem you. You know, I had been quite far away from God in my life. Even though I'd grown up in a Christian family, I didn't really get what was going on, and I didn't really believe that Jesus was anything other than just some guy that was a good guy, maybe a teacher. I didn't really think about it. I didn't really believe he was God, and wasn't sure that God exists. Although I have to say that, a few years before I really gave my life to Jesus, I had come to the conclusion that God did exist. And a lot of the things that I now understand about Jesus and who he was and is a consequence of understanding that God really does exist. He is not just a figment of our imagination. He's not just a theory. He is a breathing. While living and breathing might be quite interesting in relationship to God, but when Jesus was on earth, he was living and breathing, and God is alive, and he is the creator of the universe. And realizing that was true made it possible for me to accept Jesus as his son. So what exactly does it mean to be redeemed? What relative might we ask to redeem us? And what are we going to be redeemed from? Dictionary.com gives us several definitions of the word redeemed, most of which refer to money, to pay off, buy back, recover by payment. Anyone out there remember S&H green stamps? Maybe I'm showing my age, but when I was a kid, you'd buy stuff and you'd get these a bunch of these little thumbnail-sized green stamps, and you'd take them and you'd paste them in a book. And usually you would lick the paste and put them in the book, and the taste kind of tasted okay, at least if you're a kid. And then once you've got your booklet filled, you'd redeem the stamps for something. Yeah, I know. It's a booklet, paper, and I'm showing my age here, but that's the these days you get Amazon gift cards, which aren't really gift cards; they're just numbers, and you enter the number into Amazon.com, and it adds money to your account. So totally paperless, but same idea. Anyway, that's what redeemed means, to be bought back. 1 Corinthians 6:20 says, "For you have been bought with a price." Many of you might know that this saying is embedded on the stage at PBC because PBC honors the blood sacrifice that Jesus made for our sins. You have been redeemed, bought back at the price paid in blood by Jesus Christ. So what about the relative who might redeem us? For many of you, a life of addiction fractured those relationships. I was fortunate to have a father who loved me, but because of his addictions, he was an alcoholic. He was not very successful at providing for me. And my parents got divorced when I was in fourth grade. And they, I didn't really get to know him all that well. But I did know that he loved me, and the love was more than some of you had. I know many of you didn't even have a father, and others of you had fathers who were mean or vicious to you, beat you up, molested you. I was fortunate I did not have that, but I just didn't have my father around, and he couldn't redeem me from my sins. He just couldn't. Even if he had been capable, I don't know that I've accepted it. I was deep in my addictions when he died, and I didn't really even understand how bad I was. But more than that, the kind of redemption we need goes far beyond just getting clean and trying to live right. We just can't do it by ourselves. Well, what is it that we need to be redeemed from anyway? All my life, I kept hearing about this word sin, but no one could ever really explain it to my satisfaction. Dictionary.com has the following definition: transgression of divine law. Okay, that's really helpful. Whose divine law? Where is that written down? Before I began seriously reading the Bible, I didn't know the answers to those questions. And even after reading the Bible, it was sometimes kind of hard to tell, because they don't exactly tell you, this is sin, unless except where they list out the Jewish laws of the Old Testament. But the answers are there in various ways. And maybe I was just somewhere else during all those Sunday school sessions. I listened to a bazillion sermons from the choir bench. They all went in one ear and out the other. All I really knew was that sin was bad. There were folks around telling me I was a sinner. I didn't think I was all that bad. No worse than anyone else, at least, and a lot better than those guys. Now, I could do a deep dive into the Bible and tell you what's in there about sin, but I came to a simple way of expressing it. Basically, sin is when you go against God's will. I suppose that's not any more helpful if you're looking for something more definitive, and especially if you're confused about what God's will actually is, which I am most of the time. The best answer I can give is that God's will is that we focus on Him and do our best to be like Him. So how do we do that? I'll come to that in a minute. Okay, so we need a relative to redeem us from our sin. But why do we need to be redeemed? I mean, if we've been going against God's will all this time, don't we just have to stop doing that and we'll be okay? Leave aside that it's easier said than done, and in fact, impossible to do. Wouldn't that be enough? The problem is with what comes next. We tend to think of life as all there is, but it really isn't. Each and every one of us is an eternal being, and we're only spending a small piece of that here in this body, in this life. And what happens after that is what redemption is all about. Because God is perfect, and we're not. And as much as He loves us, He's not really thrilled about spending eternity with us messy, imperfect beings. We don't do something about it. We just mess that up the same way we messed up our own lives. I mean, just think about it. Would you want to spend the rest of your life with you? Okay. Fortunately, God loves us so much that He puts a solution in place: redemption. Through Jesus, he has bought us with a price so that we can have that relationship with him going forward. See, the wages of our sin is death, not physical death, but spiritual death. Our relationship with God dies, and we are separated from him forever. It would be something like a never-ending withdrawal and no hope of another fix. The trouble is that price must be paid, and we are incapable of paying it. We're broke and facing debtor's prison. This is why Jesus went to the cross, to pay the price we owe for our sin, to die because that is the price of our sin. It says something about the love that he had for us, that he would do that for us, because he wasn't the sinner, we were. And but the price had to be paid, and he was willing to go to the cross, to go through all that it took, to all the pain and humiliation and everything else, and the separation from God that was inherent in that, just to pay that price for us. Now, at this point, this is all quite heavy for a Christmas message, but I wanted to talk about this now because Christmas is my favorite holiday for another reason. It's the date of my rebirth in Jesus, the day I was redeemed. Up until that Christmas morning of 2001, I thought I was doing okay. I was drinking a lot, but only after dinner. I was 7 years clean from pot, the only drug besides alcohol I was ever really addicted to. Now, it's true that I did cocaine for a while, and I was into psychedelics for a while, but I was never really addicted to either of those. But I was locked into another addiction that I didn't see as a problem, and that was pornography. I didn't see the damage that pornography was doing to me. It allowed me to ignore the distance between me and my wife, Fran, and to give me relief that I needed without pushing her where she didn't want to go. In some ways, I actually thought it was helping our relationship, weird as that might seem. I had lost my job in the beginning of September that year, 2001, and figured it would be easy to find another one. But a week later, 9/11 happened, and every job in the universe went missing. I never had a problem finding work, not as a software engineer in Silicon Valley. But nobody was returning my calls, and the few that did were friends without anything they could offer me. I spent the next couple of months driving all over Northern California, trying to build a business for myself, but not really getting anywhere. And then one morning on Christmas Day, I was just having trouble sleeping, and out of the blue felt an urge to pray to Jesus. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I understand that that was Jesus finally tapping me on the shoulder and letting me know that it was time for me to stop pushing him away and start getting with the program. I was looking for success in my business, and I'd heard from a number of associates that it wouldn't happen if I didn't get God in my life. But I wasn't looking for the change that he had in mind for me. When I prayed that prayer in bed that morning, I immediately knew something was different. The demon that was inside of me, constantly focusing on me on pornographic images and thoughts, was silent for the first time in 35 years. Suddenly, this whole chunk of my life devoted to sin was just gone. I saw the damage this destructive obsession had caused in my marriage, and began to see how much I had substituted a fantasy for the real woman I'd pledged myself to for more than 20 years. Jesus healed my marriage just as surely as he healed me from my sin. Jesus redeemed me. And this is why Christmas isn't just a holiday for me. And I'm not just celebrating the birth of some guy who changed the world 2,000 years ago. It's my birthday, the day I was born again, and the day that guy changed my world 19 years ago. More than 700 years before he was born, Isaiah the prophet wrote, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone." And a few verses later, he says, "For unto us a child is born, and unto us a son is given." That's why Christmas is more than just my favorite holiday. Because all those years ago, my Redeemer, your Redeemer, was born unto each and every one of us who have all walked in the darkness and now walk in his light. Merry Christmas, everybody.